August 10, 1945, Emperor Hirohito's voice crackles over the radio, announcing Japan's surrender. For most of the world, this marked the end of World War II. The fighting was over. Or was it? While celebrations erupted in Times Square and London, on a remote, fog-shrouded archipelago in the North Pacific, the war was far from finished. This is the story of the last battle of World War II, a bloody, forgotten conflict that raged on even after peace was declared. A battle fought in the Kuril Islands, where Soviet forces launched a surprise invasion against a Japanese garrison that either didn't get the message or refused to believe it. This is a tale of confusion, defiance, and the brutal reality that wars don't end with the stroke of a pen. The final shots of the world's greatest conflict were yet to be fired. To understand why the Soviets invaded the Kuril Islands, we need to go back a few months. At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin met to shape the post-war world. Stalin, eager to expand Soviet influence in the East and reclaim territory lost in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, made a secret pact. He promised to enter the war against Japan within 3 months of Germany's defeat. In return, the Allies agreed to support Soviet claims to territories including the southern part of Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. For Stalin, this wasn't just about land. It was about securing a strategic foothold in the Pacific, creating a buffer zone, and projecting Soviet power right to Japan's doorstep. The stage was set for a final dramatic confrontation. On August 9, 1945, exactly 3 months after V-Day and just hours after the atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. The Red Army launched a massive offensive, Operation August Storm, pouring over 1 million troops into Japanese-occupied Manchuria. The Kwantung Army, once a formidable force, crumbled under the onslaught. The Soviet advance was swift and brutal. But their ambitions didn't stop at the mainland. The ultimate prize lay just across the water. The Kuril Islands, a volcanic chain stretching from Japan's northern island of Hokkaido, all the way to Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. Controlling this chain meant controlling access to the Sea of Okhotsk, a strategic gold mine. The invasion fleet was already being assembled. Now let's meet the defenders. Stationed on the Kuril Islands were about 80,000 Japanese soldiers. Many were not elite frontline troops, but they were deeply entrenched and fiercely loyal. Their commander was Lieutenant General Tsutsumi Fusaki. Like many in the Japanese military, he was steeped in the Bushido Code, which emphasized death before dishonor and fighting to the last man. When the Emperor's surrender broadcast came on August 15th, the message was riddled with static and formal, archaic language. For many isolated units like those in the Kurils, confusion reigned. Was this real? Was it a trick by the enemy? Without direct, clear orders from their immediate superiors, many local commanders chose to interpret the situation through the lens of their training, prepared to defend their position at all costs. On August 18th, 3 days after the surrender announcement, the Soviet invasion began. The target was Shamshu, the northernmost island of the Kuril chain and the most heavily fortified. Under the cover of thick morning fog, Soviet landing craft approached the shore. This wasn't a well-oiled D-Day operation. The Soviets had limited experience with amphibious assaults, and it showed. The landings were chaotic. Many ships ran aground on reefs, forcing soldiers to wade ashore through icy water under heavy fire. The Japanese, alerted to the invasion, unleashed a torrent of machine gun and artillery fire from their well-camouflaged bunkers. The beachhead became a killing field. The first wave of Soviet troops was pinned down, suffering horrific casualties. The last battle of World War II had begun in earnest. Despite the initial chaos, the Soviet troops were relentless. They were veterans, hardened by years of fighting on the Eastern Front. They pushed forward with sheer grit and overwhelming numbers. The battle for Shamshu turned into a brutal slugfest. A particularly fierce engagement took place at a strategic high point, Hill 171. Japanese tank crews from the 11th Tank Regiment launched a desperate counterattack, charging directly into the Soviet positions. It was one of the last tank battles of the war. They managed to inflict heavy damage but were ultimately outmatched and destroyed. The fighting was savage and often hand-to-hand. Bayonets, grenades, and sheer desperation defined the combat on the foggy hillsides of Shamshu. Meanwhile, communication breakdowns plagued both sides. On the Japanese side, General Tsutsumi was receiving conflicting orders. Tokyo was telling him to cease hostilities and negotiate a surrender, but the reality on the ground was a full-scale invasion. How could he lay down arms while his men were being attacked? He decided on a precarious middle path. He would enter into ceasefire negotiations but continue to resist any further Soviet advances. For the Soviet commanders, their orders were simple: take the islands. Any talk of ceasefires was seen as a potential Japanese trick to buy time and regroup. This mutual distrust and confusion poured fuel on the fire, prolonging the bloodshed for days. By August 20th, the Soviets had finally secured the beachhead and were pushing inland, albeit at a high cost. Realizing his position was hopeless and that further resistance would only lead to more senseless death, General Tsutsumi made a difficult decision. Following direct orders that finally got through from the Imperial General Headquarters, he agreed to a formal surrender. On August 23, 1945, 8 days after the Emperor's broadcast, the Japanese forces on Shumshu officially laid down their arms. But the fighting wasn't entirely over. The Soviets continued their island-hopping campaign, moving south through the Kuril chain. They met sporadic resistance on some islands, but for the most part, the remaining Japanese garrisons, now with clear orders, surrendered without a fight. The final tally was grim. The battle for Shumshu alone cost the Soviets over 1,500 casualties, with more than 500 killed. The Japanese lost over 1,000 soldiers. These were men who died after the war was officially over, casualties of confusion, delayed communication, and the relentless momentum of military operations. The Soviet Union successfully occupied the entire Kuril chain by early September, just as the formal surrender documents were being signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. This last-minute land grab had profound and lasting consequences. The islands they seized, particularly the 4 southernmost ones known as the Northern Territories in Japan, became a source of permanent tension. Today, the Kuril Islands dispute remains a major obstacle in Russo-Japanese relations. The two countries have still not signed a formal peace treaty to officially end World War II. The islands are a stark reminder of the war's messy conclusion. The story of the Battle of the Kuril Islands teaches us a powerful lesson. History is rarely neat. The end of a war isn't a single moment, but a process, often chaotic and tragic. For the soldiers who fought and died on those remote, foggy islands after the world had already declared peace, the war was all too real until the very last shot was fired. Thank you for watching. If you found this forgotten chapter of history interesting, please like this video and subscribe for more stories from the footnotes of the past.